Hello, today's video is about Mrs. Birling from Annie Spectacles, how to revise her in 5 quick quotes. I'm Zoe Sophie from PAR's English GCSE, an English teacher who's been teaching this play for many years. Mrs. Birling in the class hierarchy is upper middle class. Is implied very strongly from the opening stage directions that she is above her husband, Mr. Birling, as she is her husband's social superior. That said, she's definitely not upper class like the Crofts. First quote for her, Act 1. She says reproachfully, as a adverb, as a stage direction right here. So it indicates how she's saying it. That is a technique in itself, a stage direction. Arthur, you're not supposed to say such things. And the dash, you can write about dashes in this, in terms of it indicates there's an interruption or it's how the line is delivered. Remember, this is a play, so we're thinking that she might be interrupted by others. Reproachfully, it means it's sort of in a tone, her tone is like she's telling him off. Which really women weren't supposed to tell their husbands off. It went against the patriarchy, it went against Edwardian etiquette, yet she does. He's just given, if you've seen my Arthur Birling video, he's just given the lower costs and higher prices speech, and she's told him off for that because at your daughter's engagement you're not really supposed to talk about business, and yet he flouts Edwardian etiquette by doing so as well. So you've got various things. You're not the negative, not supposed to say such things. I mean, really, I think it's all in the stage direction. The reproachfully indicates that she has got to address him in a tone that indicates he is being told off. Second quote, please don't contradict me like that. And in any case, I don't suppose for a moment that we can understand why the girl committed suicide. Girls of that class. She's talking to her daughter Sheila at this stage, and they're having a disagreement about the way that Ava Smith has been treated. Okay, you've got the verb contradict, which means to disagree with, to go against. Don't, disagree with me like that. You're not supposed to. I don't suppose we can understand why the girl committed suicide. And there's this very derogatory tone to this bit. Again, another dash indicating an interruption. Girls of that class. The phrase that class is pejorative. That means rude, negative in tone. And it's a very classist attitude. It kind of implies that the sort of lower class don't matter. They're not valued. We don't know why she's committed suicide because she's of that class. It kind of indicates that you think of her like an alien and that she's not worth caring about. So again, it's a very negative quote about Mrs. Birling. We've had her telling off her husband. We've had her contradicting her daughter. She's quite a combative character, isn't she? So far, she really doesn't like anyone taking her on. Quote 3, with dignity. Yes, we've done a great deal of useful work in helping deserving cases. Now, I can understand why some people would think this quote contradicts quote number 2. You've got the stage direction. Again, don't ignore stage directions. They're really important. They indicate how a line is delivered. With dignity, okay? So what are the connotations of dignity? Well, it kind of connotes sort of like sort of a self-satisfaction about her. It kind of connotes maybe an arrogance there. She's upper middle class and she knows it. Yes, we've done a great deal. You've got this intensifier here. Intensifier makes more. So like, for example, you could have very would be an intensifier and very good. Great deal of useful work. See adjective, useful work. Again, useful connotes worthy. In deserving cases. Now that is really important. Again, another adjective. But it implies, especially later on down the line, that she did not think Ava Smith was not deserving case at all. So it kind of reinforces this idea that Mrs. Birling is very much of her class. She's quite classist, she's quite arrogant. She'll help those that only she believes are deserving. Number 4, I'm sorry she should have come to such a horrible end, but I accept no blame for it at all. It's a strange kind of apology, isn't it? I'm sorry. You've got that apologetic sort of reference here. So I'm sorry she committed suicide, but I accept no blame. Okay, negative qualifier here. Okay, no blame for it at all. In other words, I'm not responsible. So if you have to write about the theme of responsibility, whoops, not responsible, L-E on the end there. If you have to write about the theme of responsibility, you could use this quote because of the reference she makes to not being responsible at all. Same with Mr. Birling, the Mr. Birling video. She actively says, I accept no blame, none. It's in tone. I suppose you could say the tone on this is absolute. She's unyielding. She won't move. She's immovable. No blame. Last quote. Really, from the way you children talk, you might be wanting to help him instead of us. Now just be quiet so that your father can decide what we ought to do. Looks expectantly at Birling. This kind of fulfills the idea of Edwardian etiquette and the patriarchy, the idea that men would solve all your problems. She looks to her husband to do this. She steps back and she encourages her children to step back as well. It's the father that's going to sort it. Okay, look at this, sort of the description, expectantly. Okay, it connotes hope. And it almost connotes that she sort of abdicates any responsibility on her own part here and theirs. Well, it's your father's job. We're going to sort it out. Look at the way she addresses them. You children. They're in their early 20s. So you could say that is quite pejorative. In terms, you could say it's a term of address. A term of address is like how you would address someone in given context. So if it's your teacher, Mr. So-and-so, but if it's a family member, you might say dad or by their Christian name. I would say this is closer to an insult because they are her children. So she could be being matter of fact here, but they're adult children. So it sort of infantilizes them. It makes them seem like babies. You might be wanting to help him. Is that the inspector? Instead of us. Okay, these contrasts here. Now just be quiet. Be quiet. You've got that imperative verb. Just be quiet. She is commanding them. Shut up. Let your dad sort it out. Decide what we ought to do. Now, ought is, I'm going to draw up here, that's more of a modal verb. That implies degrees of probability. We ought to do. There's also, again, linked to context. Edwardian etiquette, there would be sort of almost like an unwritten rule book about how they should proceed whilst keeping, an air of their good family name, keeping their privacy intact, etc. So to summarise, Mrs. Birling is resolute, which is another word for someone that won't change her mind, okay? So she's quite fixed in terms of how she sees things. She's conformist, so she pretty much tries to follows the rules, particularly to etiquette, and tries to check others do the same. She's capitalist, okay? So she is the opposite to the inspector and to Priestley himself. Okay, she's like a husband, she's like the Crofts. Man has to make his own way, she kind of subscribes to that. She's very class conscious. Remember, a girl of that class, she's aware of it and she sort of seeks to try to enforce these class conventions on others. Defiant, she argues back. Okay, for a woman, she's quite outspoken. She argues back. She's cold, that's described right at the start, a rather cold woman. Okay, in terms of emotionally. She's meant to be quite cold in her airs and how she sort of commands herself. She's upper middle class. Remember that? Her husband's social superior. Those two are linked. And it's important to look at that when you're looking at her because her class, particularly for a play set in 1912, helps you to place how she's going to behave and predict her moves. I hope this is helpful. If you've got any questions, my website is displayed. Feel free to add a comment on this video and watch other videos in the class. Thank you.